Hey folks, Viking here, and today I'm bringing you a design for a brand new battlefield map. For those of you that haven't heard about the contest, DICE and EA are holding a contest where Battlefield Premium members can submit ideas for different maps. My primary occupation is actually a 3D artist, and I also do level design and environment art in a freelance position. So I definitely could not resist this contest, and I decided to go ahead and jump in and see what I could come up with. The map that I designed is called Appalachia, and it is set, at least for the moment, in the southeastern United States. If that messes with canon, it can be changed, of course. It's just kind of the setting that I wanted. I wanted lots of tall mountains, lots of green trees, a very summertime and bright setting, and if at all possible, I wanted to have kind of a rustic American feel to the map. Now, what you're looking at right now is a rough outlining of my concept in CryEngine 3, actually. Before we take a closer look at some of the capture points and stuff like that, let's go over some of my general ideas for this map concept. As I mentioned already, I wanted the setting to be at least visually inspired by the southeastern United States, the Appalachia mountain ranges, and that area. I also wanted the map size to be very large, very classic Battlefield feeling, not unlike the newer Armored Kill maps. I also wanted to try something new with the jet spawn mechanics. I designed this map around the idea of a central airport, a very large airport compared to the ones that we've seen in Battlefield 3 so far, that actually has two different capture points, one at the hangar bay area and one at the control tower. The team that controls the control tower flag is actually the only team that gets a jet, and that jet will spawn at that central airfield in the middle of the map. So even if you control that point, you've still got to get that jet taken off and get out of the middle of the battlefield. The jet spawn, along with its central location, makes the two airport control flags a very contested area right in the middle of the map. However, it's a bit more exposed, a bit more open with the runway areas, and it's completely surrounded by very high mountain ranges and a lot of forest. I also wanted the bridges in this map, as well as the river crossings, to play a much more important strategic role. There are 3 flags located across the river from the side where all of the deployment zones are. If one particular side is having a hard time holding the airfield or holding some of the points that are further up in the southern mountain ranges, if they can take the 3 flags on the far side of the river and then hold those bridges and the shallow river crossing, they can still put up a good fight and possibly even win the match without having to venture into the most dangerous parts of the central area of the map where the airport is. You guys can see some of my visual ideas right here. I wanted, as I mentioned earlier, lots of large mountains, steep roads, as well as deep forest for infantry and some open interstates and the airport, as well as the railroad tracks for vehicles. I wanted it to be bright and sunny. I wanted multiple bridge types that span the river, some of them that provide more cover than others as you cross. And for the small town areas, there's a couple of those spread out across the map, I wanted a old rustic American downtown feel if possible. To wrap things up, let's take a closer look at some of the capture points. The first one we're going to look at is A, which is downtown. This is the closest flag to the American spawn, and it contains a couple of small streets, a railroad depot, some warehouses, some small downtown style brick buildings, kind of a town hub that got left behind. Just a very classic rustic American feel. This flag is the gateway for the American forces to get into the airport area in the center of the map. Next up is B flag, which is a very high mountain campground. You can imagine some pup tents, maybe a small camper parked up here, some picnic tables, a great overlook down to the valley below with the airport, but it's kind of tough for any kind of heavy armor to get up here. This is the kind of flag that you either want to walk to or just take an ATV or a Jeep. Next up we have C flag, which is a logging camp. This flag is just a little bit closer to the Russian deployment than the US deployment, but it's still in line with that central map area where the airport is. It's definitely a bit easier with this flag to get some armor in there. It does have a small dirt road that's not quite as steep as the campground, so that's definitely a possibility. Next up we have D and E, which are the airport control tower and hangar flags. These two are at opposite ends of the airport, which is, as I mentioned earlier, a very good-sized airport. The control tower is the flag that controls the jet spawn, and because of the open runway and tarmac areas, these two flags are more exposed. The main cover you're going to have out here is the occasional airplane, some hangar buildings, and that sort of thing. This is going to be kind of the armor playground of the map, and you're going to want to get those tanks in there if you want to control the center portion of this map. The remaining 3 flags on this map are all across the central river, and there are 6 primary ways of crossing the river. There is an old highway viaduct that leads from the US deployment. There is a newer highway bridge right next to the airfield. There is a shallow water crossing on the opposite side of the end of the airport runway. There's a very long, very large railroad trestle. It's a bit more narrow, but it's definitely an option for getting across. There's a smaller pedestrian bridge next to the railroad bridge. You won't be able to get any large vehicles across that, but infantry are going to like it for sure. And finally, there is another old highway viaduct coming from the area around the Russian deployment zone. The first flag that you come to across the river is the railroad depot. This flag has a lot of cover from the surrounding forest, as well as a good amount of rail cars and that sort of thing. There's also a large highway right next to it, which allows armor to pass through pretty easily. Next up, we have the radar station up in the far northern mountains. This flag has a very long, windy road to get up to it, so for this particular flag, infantry may have more luck just cutting directly up the side of the mountain. And finally, to wrap things up, we have the State Police Headquarters flag. This one is relatively exposed, it's got some forest around it, a couple of buildings for cover, but overall a nice area for armor to run around in. Alright, well I hope you all enjoyed this tour of my map design so far. Be sure to drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear any suggestions that you may have, and I'll see you guys next time.